Hello, I'm Cheong Koon Hean. I'm the chairman for the Center for Livable Cities in the Ministry for National Development and also chairman for the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities in the Singapore University of Technology and Design. So I'm very pleased to be here to share with you one of the projects that I have been working on. Well, we are familiar with the New Urban Agenda and the 17 Global Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, one of them is Goal 11, which touch on sustainable cities and communities. Decent, affordable housing is really at the center of this goal on sustainable cities. And unfortunately today, 1.2 billion of urban population have accessibility to affordable and secure housing. And even Singapore, for those who have visited Singapore, you might be surprised to know that this is what Singapore looked like 60 years ago. We were a nation of slums and squatters. And what we did was, we formed the Housing and Development Board in 1960 to provide affordable public housing. And since then, the Housing and Development Board, or HDB for short, has built 1.1 million flats over 60 years. And it started with very basic housing, and we continuously improved the housing over time. Singapore is a very small city-state of about 730 square kilometers with 5.7 million people. And the HDB houses some 80% of the residential population in 1.1 million flats in 26 towns and estates with 94% home ownership. It's built 23 towns and 3 estates. Tengah is going to be the 24th new town of the HDB. And Tengah is in a very interesting location. It is next to what we call the Jurong Lake District and also the Jurong Innovation District. The Jurong Lake District is going to be a district of the future and Singapore's second largest commercial node after the CBD. And by 2030, Jurong Lake District will enjoy connectivity to many mass rapid transit lines. So it's going to be very vibrant. It has commercial facilities, a big commercial node, and also leisure facilities, and that's where the new science center will be located. Tengah will also be next to the Jurong Innovation District, and this is going to be a highly livable, connected, sustainable, 600-hectare smart district. And because it's next to the Nanyang Technological University, it will be a great district for researchers, students, innovators, and businesses to be there. And so, being next to these two huge, large areas of vibrant districts, Tengah stands to be in good state to build a new township in the west, comprising 42,000 residential dwelling units. Tengah is also very interesting because it sits between the western catchment area and the central catchment area, which is our nature area with great biodiversity. So Tengah serves as a great eco-corridor linking these two catchment areas and nature areas. And there's also potential to link up some of the water bodies from the Kranji Reservoir all the way to Jurong Lake. And today, Tengah is actually very green. So the idea came about that for this 24th new town, Tengah will be a forest town, a new concept for a public housing town, where our residents can work, live, play, and learn. There are basically 6 big ideas in the planning and design of Tengah, the forest town. And it's about trying to build an evergreen forest town where you can walk and cycle everywhere. You can move around with ease. And with 5 crafted districts of rather distinctive identity, we want to build close-knit communities which are sustainable and smart. And there are some new ideas that HDB has. For its new generation towns, we want our residents to live well, to live smart, and to live connected. So let me explain this in greater detail. What do we mean by live well? Well, our new towns will have a focus on health and wellness. We want to promote healthy lifestyles, improve mental well-being, give people purposeful longevity, and build inclusive communities. And we can do this by enhancing the built environment. For example, we can design for physical health and comfort, provide great quality spaces for recreation, safeguard good connectivity, encourage lifestyles at one's convenience which are active, and to strengthen social connections and intergenerational bonding. And so here are some of the ideas. We're going to build a 100-meter wide corridor a forest corridor that will run through the town with a forest fringe all around the town. We will have a lot of water bodies that will be there to collect a lot of the water runoff and to prevent flooding as a flood control mechanisms, and also for leisure. And within the town, we are going to introduce a nice town center and also urban farmways, plantation farmways for the residents, something that is new. And in the farmways, we are going to design them using biophilic principles, where we use soil, flora and fauna, water to give outdoor comfort and for social cohesion to bring people together. So the science behind it is the biophilic framework. And so, for example, using the biophilic framework, the farmways will be designed such that there's ecological balance, good sustainable landscape, and to enable residents to build community bonds. So in the way we place the planting, there are woodlands, grasslands, rain gardens to encourage biodiversity. All the water that falls when it rains will be collected, cleaned by the vegetation, collected in the urban water harvesting tank, and water reused for irrigation. And I think the community farms will also be fitted into these farmways. And as a result, we are going to have very diverse landscapes of fruits and spices, forests, and thematic gardens, and nature trails for the residents. We also want convenient access for all. That's what live well means. And so we're going to bring in the Jurong Mass Rapid Transit line to serve the residents. There'll be a bus interchange temporarily located until it's brought into the town center eventually. And we will be looking to introduce autonomous buses and shuttles. And the car parks will be EV ready for charging of EV cars. And so we want it to be a car-light town. As a result, we are going to bring in a lot of cycling and commuter pedestrian paths. Commuter paths as well as leisure paths. And Tengah will have the densest cycling network in Singapore when it is constructed. And one new idea is the town center. We are going to build a car-free town center where we will segregate transportation, buses, mass rapid transit from pedestrian traffic so that we can put in a lot of pedestrian-friendly public spaces and people can move around safely and conveniently. Living well is also about physical well-being. So we want to facilitate active lifestyles by enhancing the design of facilities to be more fun and engaging. So in this slide, you actually see a running circuit. And this running circuit is going to be on top of a multi-story car park. Other ideas are to put staircases on the outside rather than inside the building so that you're encouraged to climb up the stairs and be active and to exercise. And as we put in more and more facilities for exercise, we also want to introduce self-help assessment tools. And with an aging population and with eyesight potentially deteriorating over time, we have to be mindful that we design to foster a safe and inclusive environment. So the way we designed our signage, the colors, the size of the fonts, and grab bars within the bathrooms for the elderly in different colors, all facilitate aging progressively to make sure it's convenient and safe for the residents. And it's also about mental well-being. So the Tengah will have a lot of tranquil spaces for relaxation, providing farms and gardens and community gardens where people can have horticulture as a hobby, for eco-living, providing learning opportunities, particularly for those who are retired. Now, Live Well is also about designing a great living environment. So in HDB, we carry out urban environmental modeling for greater thermal comfort. So we study the wind flows that go through the town. We build digital twins to test out our plans and to make sure the wind flows through. There are breezes. We have good quality air that goes through the town. We also model where there might be hot spots, and this is where we will do more planting and put in gardens. And all this is to cool the town and reduce the urban heat island effect. And of course, a lot of the modeling helps our planners, architects, and engineers to visualize how various environmental factors actually impact each other individually. Now, we also want to make sure the way we design gives distinctive identities for each district. So we have 5 crafted housing districts with very different designs and concepts. That really promotes, I think, greater ownership and identity. The next is about living smart. What does it mean? All the HDB homes in Tengah will be smart-enabled homes with smart distribution boards and smart sockets, so that our residents can subscribe to a lot of smart applications for lighting, with motion sensors that they can use for elderly monitoring or to reduce consumption of water and energy in the house. So you can have, we're going to trial smart showers, smart water meters, and smart electrical meters. And there are so many types of smart applications that we will introduce. For example, smart lighting, smart waste, EV-ready lots, EV car charging-ready lots. And we will be putting in sensors to monitor many of these facilities. And a lot of data from these centers will be channeled into a smart hub. We are also going to bring in the pneumatic refuse conveyance system, whereby all the rubbish will be sucked by vacuum suction into one centralized bin. So hopefully, much better living environment and less smells and odors. And of course, as I mentioned, we will have electric vehicle-ready charging points and car parks. And all the data collected will go into a smart hub. And the smart hub enables real-time monitoring. It does data analytics, which help us to optimize the building systems. So all that data becomes very important to make sure we have reliable services for residents. Today, the air conditioning takes up something like 36% of the energy consumption of a town if we use multi-split systems, air conditioning systems. So what we like to do is to introduce centralized cooling systems which are more energy efficient. And by doing so, we will find that we can reduce energy consumption. There's cost savings by 30%, reducing energy by 30% for the residents who use centralized cooling systems. So I think a lot of the residents have actually signed up for this. We also want Tengah to be a smart energy town. So the HDB has worked with Singapore Power to develop an AI platform where you can collect a lot of data on weather, energy, and this is on an AI-enabled platform that helps to optimize energy usage within the town. So for example, in very peak hours, we could also draw on energy from solar, and if it's raining, some of the solar power will be stored in batteries, and you can also draw energy from there. So we optimize all the energy generation modes and also help people to manage their consumption by providing data, such as using smart meters. Singapore Power will be developing My Tengah app, which enables residents to manage their energy and water consumption in a more data-driven way and hopefully help to shape their behavior into a more green lifestyle. Now, all this means that we can stretch the sustainability targets for Tengah Town by, for example, reducing energy consumption and electricity by 35% and water consumption by 13%, and increase the amount of recyclables by 3.4 times. And of course, we hope to stretch these targets further as we introduce more ideas to the town. Tengah is also about living connected, making places together. We want to engage the residents. So actually the residents were engaged on the design of the town, and they gave us inputs for us to refine the planning of the town. We have engaged many groups like nature groups. The information is on the website. We are connecting communities who are going to move into these towns so that indeed it becomes a town that is really very well connected between the residents as well. And the neighborhood centers, we want to design it such that they become social and wellness hubs. They are places where the residents gather together, and maybe we even have wellness themes for some of the shops. So it's a great gathering place for our residents. And we've elevated the car parks, our multi-story car parks, so that it frees out the ground floor space for social interaction using community spaces. And again, community spaces are provided on the top of roof gardens, on top of multi-story car parks, to encourage physical activity and social interaction. And of course, even in the farmways, such as the Plantation Farmway, we have community quadrangles that will serve as social gathering spaces for residents from different precincts. So again, it's about living connected within the town. And of course, the urban farms, we hope, can bring people together to interact, to plant, to farm together. And we were thinking that maybe some of this food that is harvested can be cooked at the neighborhood restaurants for residents to enjoy as well. So we hope that we can encourage more of these activities and give residents allotment gardens for community gardens and for community farms. And so this is Tengah. And for Tengah, we want to give our residents a great living environment where they can live well, live smart, and live connected.
Welcome. We just had the privilege of listening to Koon Hean Cheong presenting the city or the project of the city of Tengah in Singapore. We have the pleasure of having Koon Hean with us today. Thank you so much for a fantastic presentation, Koon Hean. I could not think of someone better to tell us about that project, which is really the next generation of public housing in Singapore. I think you covered almost every topic I was going to ask you questions about. But one thing that I have in the back of my mind is this project, a very ambitious project that took note, 42,000 home, 700 hectares of urban forest, if you wish. That entire project was designed, was thought of before COVID-19, before the pandemic. In fact, it was announced in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Now, has COVID-19 brought you to rethink some of the concept, to reconsider, to make changes to your plans? And where do you stand today?
Thank you for the question, Francis. It's a very good question. Well, what has the pandemic taught us? I think that's the starting point, right? The pandemic has taught us that we really need to build our cities in a more sustainable and resilient way, simply because if we develop in a very irresponsible way, and it will impact the ecology of the world, it will result in a lot of the problems of climate change, such as global warming, rising sea levels, and these will all cascade down to potential problems like global warming may lead to more diseases. So building in a sustainable and resilient way becomes very critical for everybody. The second thing we learned from the pandemic really is that we need to seriously build for health and wellness as a major objective. And I think the third lesson we learned from the pandemic is that you have to plan and design spatially in such a way that you reduce crowdedness when you need to. And when you need to almost design things that put people, to segregate people without huge congestion. So if we look at the philosophy behind a lot of the planning and design for HDB, interestingly, even before the pandemic happened, there are certain principles we've adopted that really addresses this issue. I think the first one, of course, is that all HDB towns for the last 60 years have been planned in such a way that it is planned comprehensively. That means every town actually has all the facilities you need without you having to always travel to the city for the amenities. So it has schools, it has shops, it has medical facilities, parks, everything that you pretty much need for day-to-day life. And HDB towns are also planned as neighborhoods, which means that you can actually walk or cycle to a very accessible neighborhood center to get what you need. Now, in a pandemic, in effect, your neighborhoods become like bubbles that you can get around without everybody having to hop onto the mass rapid transit to crowd it and then try and get to the city to buy what you want, right? So intuitively, actually, the neighborhoods form the bubbles that you need in times of a pandemic where you need the segregation. But of course, when the pandemic is over, we love for people to get together because we like that vibrancy. So that's one that addresses that. Second thing is about sustainable and being sustainable and resilient. And as I've shared in Tengah, it is very much planned and guided by sustainability principles. And in fact, all HDB towns since 2011 has been guided by what we call the sustainability framework. And as I've explained, it's about greenery, it's about being a car-light town, less cars, and biophilic principles for planting, health and wellness, all these things go in. So I would say that intuitively, HDB has almost gone ahead and adopted some of the good principles that would have, that a lot of cities are now thinking about because of the pandemic. Now, within the flat unit itself, of course, one of the challenges is that you have to work from home, you have to study at home. And a lot of people say they need more space. Now, I think it's quite obvious everybody wants more space, right? Pandemic or not, we always want more space. But with space comes the other side of the equation on affordability. We have to still make the flats affordable. So one of the things we've done is that in the new generation design, within the internal layout of the flat, we try to make it very efficient. And we've designed it such that all the structural elements are pushed to the corners, which means that you could actually reconfigure the flat in any way you want, except for the bathrooms probably, to configure it according to what your family needs, whether it's a study space or you want some segregation, you know. And I think through some creativity, you can plan the space according to what you want. And then we still can maintain the affordability of the flat. So it's a fine balance, right? Going forward, I don't think we have the perfect answer. I think we still need now to get into the science behind the design of health and wellness. So what does it mean? I think we have the basic structure, but we do need to get into the details, maybe work with doctors and understand what health and wellness means. What else can we do? So for example, we already have designed it for good ventilation. We believe in designing for natural ventilation rather than for air conditioning. We still provide the centralized cooling system in case you need the air conditioning, but as much as possible, it is naturally ventilated. So I think we will continuously try to improve the designs.
I really like this concept of continuous learning. No? I think we are all still learning about the impact of this pandemic and how we will adapt to it. But I agree with you, it's quite interesting how in Singapore you have really pushed to the extreme this concept of polycentric cities and having different centers that can almost be separated if needed. We've talked a lot about the built environment, about technology, about new ideas, but this doesn't really come in a vacuum, right? In fact, I would argue that you've reached this 80% of home ownership in Singapore, not because HDB has built all these new apartments, but because it's part of a whole framework of policies and action that has aligned incentives and brought everything forward. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, and how is Tengah really the next generation in building Singapore in a way?
Another very good question. Of course, in the sharing, I have enough time to just talk about the built environment. And actually, the whole Housing Development Board initiatives stand on two big pillars. One is the way in which we build to give you a great environment. The other is housing policies. And I think that is what your question is alluding to, and it's absolutely true. There are a number of housing policies that are almost very critical that has made public housing affordable in Singapore. I think first policy is that we actually go for home ownership. We encourage people to own their own homes. That's why 94% of the people own their own homes, and only 6% are for rental, recognizing that not everybody will be ready to own their own homes at the initial stage, and there will always be some in the low income that will need rental. But as far as possible, the policies try to help you get on board home ownership. And this is very, very different from a lot of the social housing policies in the world. And I will explain why. Because home ownership gives you a sense of ownership and identity to the country, right? It drives a certain work ethic when you have to pay your mortgage, and you maintain your home better than if you rent it. And so on the whole, you get a better cohesive community, you get a better environment. The second policy, so home ownership is the first policy that's important as a pillar. The second pillar is really to make sure the housing is affordable. So what's the secret formula? I think the first thing is that we built a variety of flats in many different locations to fit every budget and income. So we would build 2-room, 3-room, 4-room, 5-room flats and larger 3-generation flats, right? And we also built them in different locations because certain locations will be cheaper, certain locations will be more expensive. So people have a choice according to their budget, right? So that's another important principle. The third principle is, of course, we need to help people with subsidies, and there are many generous subsidies given to buy public housing. Having said that, there's no government in the world that can afford to give a lot of subsidies, right? So you need to find a way for people to pay off their mortgage. So I think the fourth very important principle is that we allow people to use their Central Provident Fund, which is a compulsory savings scheme for retirement, to be used to pay mortgages for public housing. And as a result, people today, more than 80% of our residents, when they buy public housing, they do not come out with any cash outlay every month. Everything is paid for from the Central Provident Fund. So that is also a very important principle. The fifth principle is that we design in a life cycle mode. So when you're young, we have many policies to help you to buy public housing, right? So in Singapore, the joke really is that when the young man proposed to the young lady, they don't give a diamond ring, I think. They say, would you like to apply for a HDB flat with me? It's quite a different proposal, And so we help them with subsidies and to help them in the payment terms to buy their first flat. And when they have a family, we help them to upgrade to a larger flat. And when they grow old, their children have flown the nest and buy another HDB flat from us, they have their home. We help them to monetize the flat for a retirement. So, and there are many other policies whereby we help families to live together, all right, multi-generation, so that you have support from each other. So it's a whole area of work on public housing policies that made a high home ownership possible.
Fantastic summary. I mean, you must have presented this many times to be able to present it so clearly. And you seem to have thought about everything. You even mentioned in your presentation how you're trying to preempt and to address the issue of urban heat in Singapore. And as a Northern European, I can tell you Singapore is hot and humid. And so it's quite interesting to see you're thinking about this when building Tengah and addressing those aspects. Can you maybe, as a last quick answer, elaborate on that?
I think building cities that are resilient to climate change is going to be the next big challenge. We already have principles to build for sustainability, but I think in particular we have to focus on aspects of climate change, such as rising sea levels and the urban heat island effect, particularly because we are tropical, it's very hot and humid. So in fact, the HDB just introduced the Green Print program, whereby it's going back to a lot of the existing towns. Because Tengah is a greenfield site, you have plenty of brownfield assets. We have 1.1 million flats that are already built in existing towns. So we have to go back and try to introduce a lot of sustainability initiatives, such as solar panels to generate renewable energy. We're going to trial, for example, cool paint, because by painting our buildings with cool paint, it actually reduces the temperature. And of course, using greenery, you can reduce the temperature by a couple of degrees. So these are all the things that we're doing to deal with climate change.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation and these answers to the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining this session.